welcome to our channel, where we set out to explore wonderful great works of literature.
Wow.
Dressed in elegant clothing because...
Why the hell not?
There we go. Finally I got you to say it. So we thought, it's autumn, and Halloween is just around the corner, and we wanted to share, this is kind of like our annual update with sort of gothic stories, but we wanted to share some ghost stories, gothic stories that we thought would be kind of fun to read, and that we would recommend or not necessarily recommend, depending on the author and how we felt the quality of the stories to be. So we have two that we're going to be, and they're both female writers.
Yes.
The first one, well, actually, we wanted to take up Daphne Du Maurier first.
So Don't Look Now by Daphne Du Maurier. It's a collection of her short stories. And so they include the stories Don't Look Now, Not After Midnight, A Borderline Case, The Way of the Cross, and The Breakthrough is the last one in this collection.
Okay. And also sort of the American sort of like one excellent American female writer, very famous, Edith Wharton. Many of you know Age of Innocence, and what else? She did The House of Mirth. You've read a number of these novels by her. So yes, a very famous American writer.
Yes.
And let's begin with yours then. Let's talk about Daphne Du Maurier.
So we'll talk about Daphne Du Maurier. And we've had a couple of other, I guess, autobiographical points about her, so I won't go into detail about that. I'll just get right into the stories.
Yeah.
But before I do so, did you notice how Daphne Du Maurier's doggo
oh my gosh,
looks just like our Rupert?
Yeah, it's quite shocking.
Which just makes me love her more somehow.
We actually just found that out just like an hour ago.
Like, is that Rupert's great grandmother or something?
Yeah,
who knows?
Or grandpa. Who knows?
Yeah, who
Maybe his
knows?
grandpa.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Anyway, okay, so Don't Look Now. So I'm going to just do like a really quick synopsis of each of the stories and kind of a point from each of them that I felt was either intriguing about it or got me thinking of it afterwards, because they're all a bit psychological or horror-esque in the way that they're told. I guess the last one is the only one that's a bit more sci-fi than the other stories. So Don't Look Now, a lot of people know this one because of the film that was made after it, but the film itself is quite different than the short story, as that typically is the case.
It's still an excellent film, by the way.
Yeah. So basically it's about John and Laura Baxter, who are grieving over the loss of their young daughter. And it's really a creepy tale, which at first appears on the surface to be about a concerned husband for his wife and his concern for her having had quite a shock and still grieving the daughter and not being able to let it go. But then as you get deeper and deeper into the story, they make eye contact with this kind of odd couple of older ladies, and one of them is vacant in the eyes. And it's a story about the kind of coincidental, creepy things that happen after the contact with these women. So one appears to be kind of psychic and tells a story to Laura in the washroom about how she's been in contact with their dead daughter. This gives her actually a sense of relief that her daughter is in a place where she is, I guess, content, and in a way gives Laura closure, but to the husband it seems like she's going mad. But the irony of the story as it goes through is that the truth ends up coming out in a kind of interesting way, where it's more about his own mystical experience of being haunted by his daughter, and like, do we know, is he mad, or is he really seeing visions of his daughter, or is this all just his unconscious kind of projection of his own suffering onto his wife throughout the whole story? We don't really know, but in the end it's quite a creepy, very, very creepy ending. And yeah,
it's all set in Venice too,
it's all
right?
set in Venice, yeah. And so there's these kind of scenes that come in and out that are eerie, of him seeing visions and perhaps having a bit of a mystical or psychic or breakdown himself. That's kind of my quick synopsis on that.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that? Because you kind of remember it a bit.
No.
Okay. The next one is called Not After Midnight, and this is about a schoolmaster who's either on medical leave or he's officially quit his job. His name is Timothy, and he decides to take a vacation at a seaside resort. But he's very controlling and very, I guess, his character is inflexible, and so he really wants his specific vision of how he wants his vacation to be. He wants it to be on this particular seaside part of it, not close to anyone else who's vacationing. And for whatever reason, the hostess and the owners of the resort are like, oh, no, you can't have that place. And he walks over and he sees that there's no one in it, there's no one occupying it. And so he's quite frustrated, so he goes back and he's like, no, I want that one. And he's like, I'll pay whatever it is for the cost of that one. And lo and behold, he finds out that there was a murder recently in there. And so that's why it's free, but that doesn't really bother him. He doesn't seem to be afraid of that. And so he says, yes, I'll take it, whatever. I just want to have my vacation. And so he does a lot of painting by the seashore. And for whatever reason, he can't seem to stop fixating on the closest chalet to him on the resort, who has this very obnoxious character who's, I guess the best way to put it is unsavory character. He's a bit of a drunkard. There's something rough around the edges about him. His name is Stoles. He kind of runs the place when people kind of are afraid of him, but behind his back mock him for being a bit of a fool, I guess, in a way, a drunkard fool, even though he clearly has a lot of power, whether that's monetary power, we're not really quite sure throughout it. Anyway, eventually the tale kind of turns, and he becomes almost obsessive about this Stoles, but he's under the impression that Stoles is kind of creeping him and leaving antiquities, because Stoles is a collector of antiquities and goes out on these ships looking for shipwrecks. And so he leaves this kind of creepy jar in the main character Timothy's chalet one day, and he's kind of freaked out by it, but also angered that this man came into his chalet and is trying to play like mind games with him. And so he stalks him and follows him out to watches where his ship goes, and then decides to go diving there the next day. And then the story kind of ends in this weird, odd, I guess, cave where there was a shipwreck with that same vessel. And ultimately, we don't really know what happens in the end, but it's kind of an unnerving tale in the end, because we're not really sure, did he actually have some sort of mystical power in this antiquity that he was casting a spell upon him through the vessel, or did the man just go mad? So kind of a similarity in my mind to Shirley Jackson's tales, where you're like, is it a bit of both? Is it one or the other?
So she plays a lot of the psychological theme there of like order. Did this actually happen, or was this
a little bit? But I'd say Shirley Jackson has more of an illusion of that. I think she kind of outright says there is a mystical, or there is an element of like the dead, or an element of like control through a vessel. So it is more fantastical in a way.
Yeah. And who would you say is more cynical
Shirley
about
Jackson.
human nature?
Shirley Jackson, weirdly enough.
Yeah. And is it always like about some sort of relationship with like a husband and wife,
No.
or partners, or men and women in Daphne Du Maurier's stories?
So I would say Shirley Jackson tends to focus more on the like dark feminine, and has most of her characters are the female, from the female perspective. Whereas this one, there's, for example, the last book, keep calling it a book, story, The Breakthrough, is all men. And so there's no element of kind of the dark feminine aspects or psychological. It's more, I guess I'll just jump to that one. The Breakthrough is more about, I guess it's like almost like a Frankenstein type of theme. Yeah, where it's an introduction to technology's power, and a crazy scientist who is trying to extract or communicate with the soul after death. And so he's trying to somehow capture the essence of the soul after death through his experiments, and in doing so, uses a young girl, which goes against the morality of this young scientist. So I would say that one doesn't really have like, I mean, obviously there's psychological aspect to it, but it's not so much like the person's dark nature being hidden that's being revealed to them necessarily. It's like actually speaking to, you know, maybe we should slow down with technology, or like see the darkness in technology.
Yeah, the reason why I asked is just because with Edith Wharton, some stories in this collection are quite good. I wouldn't say horrific. I wouldn't say really chilling, but more unnerving in a psychological sense, but also interrelationship wise, right? Like she goes very much into sort of the relationship between husbands and wives as well. And sort of the backdrop always tends to be sort of that sort of supernatural elements that come into play. And I find sometimes she does it with good effect and she really builds certain tension, and other times really with the writing style, sometimes of that sort of 19th century sort of Henry James style, sort of like inner monologues or dense descriptions that you kind of get lost, and the story kind of gets lost. You're like, well, what does this relate to the actual momentum of the story, right? It kind of gets lost in its own description. And so some of the stories actually end up falling off completely at a climactic moment, but not even necessarily like, you know, in a true horror sense where, you know, like, oh, and then the person's around the corner and then it stops, or something like that. Just like in the first one, Don't Look Back.
Yeah, there's a climactic
There's
ending.
a climactic ending, and it just stops right there, and that's what gives you the frisson, right? That little frisson of terror, right? Like, oh my God, what happened? But in with Edith Wharton, I just remember this one story called The Pomegranate Seed. And, you know, this woman recently married to her husband, and he's very loving, he's very kind, and of course his last wife died, but he starts to receive these letters in the mail ever since, once they come back from the honeymoon, they receive these gray envelopes. And every time he comes in, she of course doesn't read his letters. He looks at it, looks distressed, goes to his library, reads it, and he's literally not the same man the entire evening. And so she notices this pattern where every quite consistently a letter would arrive and he would react the same way. And so one day she decides, you know, I've had enough of this. I'm going to watch him open it up and see what he does with it. And she hides around the corner and he kisses the envelope, and she realizes, oh my gosh, this is another woman. He's having an affair. What am I going to do? And she starts pursuing him and sort of really like, you know, holding on to him. She says, I want to fight for my husband, but I need to know the name of this person. And of course, he won't get the name. So it's building suspense. It's building that psychological tension between the couple. And then he starts disappearing for periods of time. And essentially what she realizes, you know, it's his dead wife. His dead wife is writing him letters and calling him back from the dead, essentially, right? But essentially she goes to her mother-in-law, where did he go? Where has he gone? And she's already suspecting something is amiss. And the mother's like, oh no, we should call the police, when she finally comes to the realization that, you know, it's his dead wife who's been sending him letter after letter. And she's like, well, what good does it do? This is a ghost. And of course the mother-in-law's like, well, they might help. They might be able to help. And then that's how the story ends. And it's almost like, seems like it was too rushed. She really wanted to end it, and then she just stopped it right there. She stopped writing.
Anticlimactic.
Very anticlimactic, climactic. And so there was like a strong sense of that in Edith Wharton stories. And sometimes, you know, she's painting a scene too long, and you just lose the interest. And like I remember Edgar Allan Poe, you know, obviously the master of short stories in the Gothic horror genre, right? He always had like, he always believed that a short story is the best medium for supernatural and horror tales, because you have to be so incredibly concise, and your entire narrative arc has to be very much like down to the almost the bare minimum that you need to get it onto a short story format. Otherwise it becomes, you know, a novella, or it becomes like a full-length novel. And so the sense of terror can only be contained in its maximal effect in such a short frame. Otherwise, you lose that oomph that comes at the final moment or throughout it, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would say, like, in this collection, there's
Yeah.
some that are overtly horror, supernatural, but then there's one, the Way of the Cross, for example, which, again, I would say it's more like a psychological short story thriller. Like, I wouldn't classify it as, if I read it alone outside of this book, I wouldn't have classified it as gothic or horror necessarily, because there's no...
Do you want to give it like a brief?
Sure. So basically it's a tale of a group of Brits traveling with a vicar to Jerusalem for... yeah, it's kind of like a pilgrimage, but it's more just to go back to the holy city and learn more about it through, obviously, the church that they belong to with the vicar.
Yeah.
And then the main vicar becomes ill, who everyone adores, and he's somewhat of a, like, very social person, so he gets along with these socialite people, even though he himself is holy. And a younger vicar has to step up, who no one is really familiar with, which already puts him at a disadvantage. And he's very devout and doesn't really care to do the social aspect of that job. And so but he wants to do a good job, and he feels really nervous about it. So it's kind of a struggle about that, but at the same time, it's also about this group of people going on this pilgrimage, but actually having no interest on this. It's all for their own kind of hidden motives that are not really truly for that, to learn about, for example, any of the religious aspects or stories,
so
or
self-serving.
gospels. They're all self-serving in a way, except for a 9-year-old innocent boy named Robin, who interestingly enough, he knows the most about, it seems, about the gospels and the stories.
Yeah.
And he sees the parallel between the reality that they're living in and the stories themselves from the gospel. For example, like the Last Supper and the significance of a certain, like, spiritual event that was supposed to be happening on the same day. And he in his innocent way, he's kind of pissing people off, because he's showing the reality behind a lot of people's motives, but in a very innocent way. And kind of bringing them out into the actual religious places in a place I think they don't really feel fully comfortable being, because it opens up some guilt, some repressed thoughts about themselves. So anyway, they go to the different sites, and in doing so, they learn some insight deep into their own unconscious. But again, it's portrayed in a very captivating way, because the parallel between their hidden unconscious, we've kind of talked about this today, even on a different level, is, it's the thing that they tell themselves about themselves that ends up ironically being not true about themselves at all. So, for example, there's this woman who is in love with the vicar, like, absolutely, like she's in lust with him in a way, and she's like this older, middle-aged woman, but she always acts like she's this, like, very pious woman who brings him just, baked goods for the good of being a kind, pious woman, but ultimately her motives are really that she's quite in love with him, and everyone makes fun of her behind her back, and she didn't even necessarily know deep down that she's really in love with this man, and really at the end hoping for him to show interest in her, right? And so she ironically is kind of at this, like, I wish I remembered the actual Jerusalem site, but it was essentially a big fountain that would heal people, and she is trying to just wash her face or something like that, and then she ironically, like, drops something that was a memory of him into the fountain and falls in it herself and almost dies. And each character, in their way, they have their own mini death, either of their ego or of something, like, really deeply repressed, but it's at the site that represents
the purification process.
Yeah, the purification process of that. So again, the kind of overall, I really love the story, but the overall, to me, when I was reading it, was, here they are in this holy land thinking that it's going to be all light and love and butterflies, and they fall into this like deep dark hole inside themselves.
A very superficial understanding of.
They had a very then it's just a flash, maybe it's just a moment, but it's a deep dark reflection of themselves, and in a way they walk away shattered but also healed, because they finally saw something that they so needed to see.
Okay.
So that was The Way of the Cross.
That's excellent. That sounds like a really good story.
Really good one. The other one that was really interesting that I liked was The Borderline Case. But again, I wouldn't have classified this as like a horror or even a gothic tale. But it's about a woman whose father she adores, and he dies basically while looking through a photo album with her, and they had expected this death. Her and her mother, because he was obviously terminally ill, or they alluded that he was ill from something, right? So it wasn't unexpected, his death, but the way he died surprised her, because he was getting better apparently and like having a good day that day, and then he's flipping through this photo album and he gives his daughter this queer look, and so he looks at her, and then almost like a moment of realization or surprise or shock comes on his face, and then he dies. And so the daughter is, for whatever reason, feels like incredibly guilty, and she's like, I feel somehow responsible deep down, like my intuition is telling me that I feel that I'm somehow responsible for this. And all the nurse is like, no, it was his time to go. And she clearly doesn't have a very good relationship with the mother, who's a bit of a narcissist, or they allude to like a borderline herself, And so she doesn't really have a great relationship with her mother. And she decides that she's like, in order to grieve, I have to figure out what was with this photo. So she flips to the photo book where her father was looking at when he died, and it was of his friend Nick. And, both the mother and father kind of had fallen out of touch with this man, even though he was his father's best man at the wedding. And he, tells some queer tales about Nick, recluse, and served in the Navy, and kind of had a loose screw, like a little bit, either like flippant in his nature, I guess. Like one moment really ecstatic, and then the next minute really serious and quite angry or scary. And so she's not really sure why they fell out of touch, but she decides to go find this man, and it's hard to do that in itself. And interestingly enough, this is based on somewhat of a true story. So Daphne Du Maurier did try to find this person in the intelligence, like Secret Service.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was a father's friend. It was really hard to find him, but everything else she said was imaginary, but somewhat based on a true story, which is interesting. So eventually this main character finds Nick, and she ends up being hostage on this island with him, but in a weird way she's also finds him attractive or like seductive in some way. And then the tale gets kind of darker, where there's something odd about him. Like he has a picture of her mother, and rather than her father being in the portrait, there's like a sticky of his own face, Nick's face, over top of her father's face on their wedding day. And so some unnerving things like that, where you're like, is he also like just mad, or is he just like playing games with her? Because he realizes who she is in a short period of time. But the creepy thing isn't that. So eventually, you find out that he's involved in some civil war issues and religious war issues, quite involved with bombing and a lot of undercover involvement in crime and espionage stuff. Yeah, and again, the main character kind of finds it unnerving but also seductive. And then she's right when she was like kind of getting really, almost in a way, possessed by him. She's just dropped back off at her hotel, and he just like leaves her there, doesn't tell her how to get back to that island, cuts off all communication, and says like, well, we'll never see each other again. And she's an aspiring actress, so then she, the interesting thing is the ending is her sitting in her kind of the behind the stage in the theater in her dressing room, and she's about to go on for a performance, and she gets a big bouquet of flowers from this Nick, and in it is a photograph of, at first, who she thinks is herself. And she looks at it, and again it kind of comes full circle. So it was a really good ending. It didn't drop off, but it comes full circle, and she's looking at the photo, and she thinks it's herself. And then the letter says something along the lines of, I thought I recognized you, and then I realized it was only myself I was seeing. And it's a picture of him. And, you know, part of this disturbing story is that, so Nick is actually her father from an affair he had with her mother. Mm-hmm. And the photograph, the whole full circle is that the photograph was actually of, he put the father, who she thought was her father, before his death, put two and two together, not knowing that really his daughter wasn't his daughter, and it is what killed him. And the horror in the daughter is that, oh my gosh, like, the only part, she didn't like her mother. She thought her mother was a bit mad and narcissistic. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that she, like, kind of redeeming quality she thought she owed to her father. Oh, yeah. And then her father's really also this other kind of psychotic person on an island. And so that's the part that gives me the chills too. It's like this realization that the person
bloodline is mad.
And she saw herself in both of, like, the reason why she was attracted to this man was because actually he was quite similar to her dark side.
It's kind of, in a way, it's just like a horror. I think there's a horror movie about that a few years ago.
Yeah.
Called like, not Ancestry, but anyway, it's like the horror of the bloodline. It's the horror of the ancestry, right? Yeah. This is like, who were you related to? Who is your blood, right? In a way, that's the ultimate thing that is out of your control, right? Yeah. You can't choose your parents. You can't choose your ancestors. And the sense of like madness being linked to the blood in this ancient nobility, or even like ancient lineage or whatever, it's a very much a common trope as well in a lot of Gothic stories. You get that with Edgar Allan Poe, you get that with Lovecraft, it's like the last of a dying line, and it's always the last person who's the most mad because they've inherited all the madnesses and evils committed from the earth. But obviously
it's
that's
one
an
thing
extrapolation
to be like, oh, both my parents are crazy, knowing that, and then really mourning the death of the person you thought was the most, what you inherited the most redeeming qualities from didn't actually. Anyway,
it's also a sense of like lack of self-knowledge, right? The horrors of self-discovery.
Yeah, and that's all of them, right? It's like other than the breakthrough, which was more sci-fi, and the horror of technology, all of them were really about what we don't know about ourselves being revealed. And that really truly being the horror is the things we don't know about ourselves. Yeah. Or we refuse to see about ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Shall we rate these?
Yeah.
You can rate yours first, perhaps?
I mean, it's hard to rate a collection of short stories.
But as a general impression, let's say?
I mean, I still, like, to be quite, I love Daphne Du Maurier. I think she's a great storyteller. I would say I still prefer, if I were to pick up a Shirley Jackson novel over Daphne Du Maurier, personally, I think Shirley Jackson just speaks to my way of seeing my sensibilities more than Daphne Du Maurier, but I still found her quite interesting.
So if you could rate the collection as a whole, as a book?
I give it a 4.5.
4.5 out of 5? That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And so with Edith Wharton's Ghosts, I would give this, sadly I'd give it a 3.5.
Oh, really?
I don't think, there were some stories that were...
yeah, and we read one together, right?
Maybe a little bit more interesting.
What was the one we read?
Oh, we read a number of them. We read the last story is called A Bottle of Perrier.
Oh yeah, The Bottle of Perrier. I thought that was quite good.
Yeah, my sense is that she's an excellent writer. She won the Pulitzer Prize for one of her novels. I think it was not The House of Mirth, Age of Innocence.
She won a Pulitzer Prize for that one. She was the first female writer to do so, right? But yeah, I don't think ghost story writing was necessarily
Her forte.
forte.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, The Bottle of Perrier was, I thought it was different than other literature she has written. Like, it was, the setting was different, the environment was different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't say it left me very chilled.
No.
Or
None of
it's kind
these
of predictable.
None of these stories were that thrilling. I think maybe I had one chill moment.
Yeah. And I would say, like, with these ones, it wasn't, same thing. Like, I wasn't left with, like, necessarily a creepy feeling. It was just an unsettling feeling about, it wasn't, like, a supernatural creepy, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Other than, I guess, the first one, Don't Look Now.
Yeah.
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 I would say, if I may, it's not one of the books that we decided to read, but Walter de la Mare was an English writer. I think he was like early 20th century, in the 30s. He did a lot of stuff in the 30s as well. He was a poet, but he also dabbled in more supernatural tales as well. And there's this one story, I think we should read it. I would love to know your thoughts on it. And it's called Seaton's Aunt. Seaton's Aunt. But then, what does that sound like to you?
Satan.
Yeah, sounds like Satan's Aunt. But the whole story is like so well composed and so subtle that you don't know what the hell to think. It's such an excellent novel. There's such a sense of like unease. That's the best way to describe it. Unease. And you're like, and your mind is trying to grapple with what is it that you're actually listening to? Like, what's the mystery here? And he doesn't give any of it away. And you're constantly left still as, perturbed as you were when you began it. Definitely highly recommend that one. And that's one that's not really well known because Walter de la Mare is kind of forgotten. Tartarus Press, which is like a very niche publishing house in the UK. They provide, they make these beautiful editions of works, but they try to reclaim a lot of these lost and forgotten authors, and they try to reproduce a lot of their works for the present day so that their memory can be kept alive. Highly recommend that one. That's a 5 out of 5, but that's one longer short story. But yeah. Well, anyway, we hope you have a very spooky Halloween.
Happy Halloween!
Happy Halloween and stay warm. Things are...
As our fire goes out.
We've had our first frost a couple of days ago.
Yep. And the leaves are particularly beautiful this year.
They are very nice.
Yes.
Okay then. Well, we'll see you next time. We do have the Alexandria Quartet that we will be reviewing for our next session.
Maybe
care.
something else creepy. Who knows?
Who knows? Bye-bye. Take care.